Greetings, allies. It is Monday, May 20th. Had to look at the date, 2019. Here is your cup of Jones. Velo Morgulis to everyone, Game of Thrones fans. We did our Game of Thrones reactions last night. Late last night, Amanda joined us for that. Amanda, unexpected guest star of the last 3 episodes. Only of 5 episodes of me and Damiani sitting on a couch talking about Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones season's over, Barry's over, Gotham ended a couple weeks ago. It's saying goodbye to a lot of shows. You know, Barry's coming back. Gotham and Game of Thrones are not. How many Batman shirts do I own of the classic logo? This is it, baby. I used to have a gray, not the classic logo. Well, this isn't the classic logo. Classic is in the 80s. But I did have the Dark Knight. It was a gray shirt that had the Dark Knight signal, and it washed funny. Like half of the gray became a different color. A different shade of gray. But I definitely should invest in more Batman shirts. I also just want to be that guy that wears a Batman shirt all the time. You know, I got to branch out. So yeah, quick episode today. If you missed it 3 days ago, I did a Friday episode because I was at Judges Week all week. And then before that, I was in Hawaii for 5 days. And so just finally this week getting back into the groove of things. So not a ton to announce, not a ton to talk about today. Only 4 pages of questions, which should be a nice refresher. But I will say I am excited about, and I only say this stuff on Cup of Jones. This is not something we would say in a group stream. This is not something I would put in a YouTube video. But every now and then we're going to make little small quality of life improvements to the studio. And I went and did a bunch of things. I specifically did the Bed Bath & Beyond run. So I hadn't done that yet, basically getting just like comfy amenities around the office. And so fun new things that are in the office now. We now have a vacuum cleaner. That was something that we put off for quite a while because we're fine living in our own filth. But did some sweeping, but just didn't really like get in those rugs with the vacuum cleaner. And kudos to Amanda. I totally would have gotten one of the big bulky models to get that high performance, but Amanda got a really sneaky Dyson that's really thin and like can get in crazy corners and still had plenty of power to just clean that space up. So it's actually kind of fun. I'm sure it will eventually very much not be fun, but it was fun with this new vacuum cleaner going around the office cleaning stuff up. We got a new printer, or we got a printer. We didn't have a printer. Ian definitely wanted me to get a very cheap one, so we'll see how it actually kind of seems similar to the one that we have here at the house. So I printed something. It was a test. I didn't get any printer paper, actually. While we were like checking out, I was like, oh, we didn't get paper. And got some hand towels for the bathroom. I wanted to get red because that's our color, but maybe I can get black or white in there. But I ended up getting blue towels because they just fit the kind of the pinkish, light brown, orangey tones that were in the bathroom already. Red, I thought would have been a little too intense. Would have been like a Lannister bathroom. And got some air fresheners for each room because some of those rooms we can open the windows, some we cannot. And so some of those rooms were getting just some bizarre odors. And didn't even think about it until Kyle Bossman was having neck pains before we shot the Easy Allies podcast. And he's like, do you have Advil? And I'm like, you know what? I always have Excedrin on me because I do get headaches, and headaches are the worst. I can deal with neck pain on a podcast. But I was like, we should have a little medicine rack. So went to the store, got a, get a Bed Bath & Beyond, got one of those little things you had in college, one of those little like shampoo crates, and put in, allergy medicine, cold medicine, Advil, Tylenol, Excedrin, like just a Band-Aids, ointment, like just a lot of not necessarily first aid kit, but just kind of like some nice stuff we can have around the office we can offer to people. And we're gonna be having some guests coming in for E3, so it'll be nice to have the space all nice and cleaned up. We have them come in. Oh, you have a headache? We have something for that. Hey, we wash your hands. You can dry them now on something that's not a paper towel. Today, new Mysterious Monsters at 2 p.m. Pacific time. New episode of Mysterious Monsters. I believe this is the one Daniel Bloodworth is in. Don't quote me on that. I scanned the thumbnail this morning really quickly going through her channel, but I think it was a Bloodworth episode. My edit of Michael Huber's review of Rage 2 will be happening today. I did the VO last night. I cut it in. I started to grab some of the music. I downloaded all the gameplay last night, and I'm excited to go through and work on that. I actually have not played that yet. I got that for PC. It's one of my first like big PC games since I got my PC. So I'm going to be running through that, trying to find my wife. And kudos to Huber. Huber is now officially out of town. Huber took out of town today. He's going to be out of town for at least a week and a half, maybe 2 full weeks. Well-deserved vacation. I am definitely still feeling my vacation that I had in Hawaii. I was thinking about maybe having photos in this episode of Cup of Jones. I didn't have time. I might do that next week. Just kind of show you some fun stuff that I did while I was in Hawaii. And tomorrow night for our group stream, 6 p.m. Pacific time, Tuesday night, we're going to be playing the Castlevania Collection, which... sometimes we have stuff like Hall of Greats or a tournament or like a multiplayer setup that's kind of tricky. There's some like group streams that come up. I'm like, oh no, that's going to be a little complex. I hope that goes well. And then there are other group streams where it's like, oh yeah, I'm kind of curious about this game. I don't know how that group stream will go. That'll be interesting and inform us of future group streams of, okay, if that game produced that type of group stream, then, we'll see how we can modify that or maybe avoid games or do more of those games in the future. And then there's group streams like this where it's just like, oh yeah, that's going to be great. That's just going to be so easy. Like, just jump into each game, hand off the controller, maybe when somebody dies, or play the games completely out of order and just enjoy the Castlevania franchise for 2 hours. I'm very much looking forward to that. Already talked about Game of Thrones. I do want to say this because I thought it was funny. It might sound like I'm getting close to spoilers, but I'm not even gonna. No, this is not a spoiler thing. We did a pool with my family. So I'm sure there's lots of people that had various leagues and pools that they did for Game of Thrones in various forms. With one friend, I did the thing called Hodingo, which we had a bingo board, and then every time somebody died, you'd cross it off, and then you'd try to get, a line. We did not win. Someone won that, but it was not us. There were some names on there. We were like, oh, come on. We haven't seen that person since season 3. But with my family, we did just a straight, here's everybody that's still remaining in the cast. Who will die? Will they be turned into a White Walker was a bonus guess that you could do if you and you would get a point for it, but you would lose a point for it if you were wrong. And so my brother and my mom actually got, very low scores because they took a lot of risks. I did not take a lot of risks. I ended up in second place. But I'm telling you this because my dad, who cognitively has a lot of struggles in his old age, and you can keep up a conversation with my dad pretty easily, but with something like Game of Thrones, especially if it's been a year and a half, he was like, wait, who is what? Who's Dolores Ed? What? And so I had to kind of take him through his list, and I kind of suggested maybe some things for him. And sometimes he went along with my decisions. Sometimes he made up his own stuff. But it kind of seemed like he was struggling through it when I went through it with him. So of course he won. So the range of the scores wasn't that intense, but I thought I might have. I felt pretty good about that list. I'm actually curious to go back and revisit that. And Bloodworth already beat me to it, but he reposted, I think it was Bloodworth, our predictions that we did before the season started. So it's going to be fun to go back and revisit that video and see how it all added up. Tabletop Escapades Season 2, which I mentioned about halfway through last week's business questions section, has concluded. Season 2 is over. And speaking of Game of Thrones, just like any good fantasy epic, there's going to be a break between now and when Tabletop Escapades does return, in whatever format it does return. Ben and the rest of the cast, because it's a big cast. It's the biggest like weekly ongoing thing that we produce with the biggest audience outside of group streams. Even more so than the podcast, because we can do that podcast without Ian, but like you need that entire cast. You need those 5 people involved. So will all 5 of them be returning for season 3? Will it be the same plot? Will it be the same game? I don't know. I'm on the edge of my seat, much like you, and we're gonna give the boys time to figure that out. So We're going to revisit that at the end of May and try to figure out if it's responsible to keep that as a goal for the month of June, given that we don't have any plans for June, especially with E3. It's I believe likely that Tabletop Escapades will not be a goal for June, but we'll see. And I know this is hot on the heels of us. We also did the Devil May Cry retrospective, if you missed that. And I know that that's on the heels of us saying we're going to be removing retros as a goal. So I understand if as a patron, you're like feeling a little shaky with the goals in terms of like us not doing stuff, but keep in mind, you know, none of that is done. All of that is done in terms of trying to regulate how this company works, and not only realistic expectations for how can we keep producing the stuff that we already made promises that we would produce, but how can we surprise you? How can we make fun plans for our event coverage this summer? How can we make plans for how can I personally get ready for having a kid in August and try to get stuff ahead, you know, done ahead of time? But how can we cover E3 bigger and better than we have before? How can we change Easy Living this year? Which I should have a final announcement next Monday about when that will be and more details about that. Then that's the exciting stuff that we want to focus on. So we miss this stuff when it happens. It's fun, you know. Obviously, I'm sure the boys are enjoying taking a break. No more so than Ben, who puts a tremendous amount of work creatively and cognitively into producing Tabletop Escapades. But it's fun to put some things aside, work on other things. And, you know, we have a new exclusive show coming up, Achieve It Yourself. We have more episodes of Mysterious Monsters coming up. And so there are things to celebrate along with the last retrospective. So there are special features that hopefully you're enjoying and might shine some light on looking back at March, April, and May, when a lot of questions were being asked about, hey, when are we going to get exclusive show? And what, you know, what's going on with the retro news? And all of those things were just impending coming up. So things begin and things end. Tabletop Escapades, much like Game of Thrones. Obviously, Tabletop Escapades Season 2 ended much better. The Game of Thrones Season 8 ended. We all know that. And there we go. Those are all your updates. Let's do business questions. Am I 100% on this smoothie? Almost 100%. 99%. There we go. I fully downloaded. We're also like, shout out to Daniel Bloodworth, who I don't think is in chat today, but who's been scheduling all of our E3 stuff. And I think maybe I'm at this point every single year, but I think there's like a little bit less than I usually get excited for any regular E3. I think Animal Crossing is like my biggest thing. And some of the other stuff is just like, oh yeah, okay, I'll check that out. Dying Light 2? Sure. It's gonna be nice to kind of step back from a producer angle and think about E3 less in terms of like all the games I'm gonna freak out about, but more in terms of how we're going to cover it. And yeah, if you missed the announcement last week, we got Greg Miller and Tim Geddes coming in on the final Friday after E3, which some people go to Disneyland. I'm sad I'm missing E3 Disneyland that day, but it'll be nice having those guys there. And it's this thing. Everybody goes back to San Francisco right away. Nobody sticks around to go to Disneyland. Nobody sticks around to talk about more E3 stuff. So it's going to be nice that we can tag those two guys at least, and possibly some other people, you know, might throughout the week and on that Friday might stop by, some fun guest stars to talk about their E3. But yay. The place is vacuumed. It's time to set up new equipment for E3. Business questions. Cesar Villa, you have mentioned how you'd like to have twitch.tv/EasyAllies just be running videos 24/7. Well, I mean streaming and running videos. While the idea is interesting, have you talked about it with the other creators that have attempted it? I remember the Screw Attack channel used to do that, and suddenly they stopped. I have no idea if this had something to do with Craig and Sean's departure from the channel, or if it was just a thing of just wasn't worth it. But maybe you could touch base with one of the former Screw Attack guys to check out how that went and why it stopped. I've never talked to Craig about why he started that and why he stopped doing that. But I can speak from experience because we used to have GT On, Game Trailers On, which was our nonstop streaming channel. It was a link that you could go to on GameTrailers.com. And the way that was handled was one editor at the company. And keep in mind, this is one of like 7 or 8. We had a lot of editors just pumping out Game Trailers content all day, 5 days a week. And one editor would be responsible for taking all of the exports that would be put in one folder on our shared Xan server, and then they would line them all up in the order chronologically or in a specific order that was determined by Rohan Rivas, who is now at Epic Games. And then that would produce like a 4 or 5 hour chunk, and then that 4 or 5 hour chunk would just loop on a PC that was in the room, I think, where I did voiceover, where my booth was. And also in that room was just, you know, a PC that just, that's all it did. And I believe we stopped doing it. And if I had to guess, and this is just me guessing, if I had to guess why Screw Attack stopped doing it, is it wasn't making them money. It wasn't something that was getting a ton of views. It wasn't something that certainly we wouldn't want something like that to get in the way of programming we already have planned. Like if one of the allies wants to stream and we're showing an episode of something, wait till that episode's over, cut in, and then start your stream. But I think they did it, yeah, because they weren't getting the metrics that they wanted. And that's the reason to do anything if you have a traditional business model. What is amazing about all of you and what is tremendous about Easy Allies and what is really exciting to experiment with, it is a little frustrating because a couple months will go by in the process of experimenting with something, but it's always nice trying out not only new types of content, but new distribution channels with our community and seeing if that's something that they just enjoy. And if our community just enjoys something and is appreciative of having it, kind of like our website, like we don't make any money on our website, but obviously our website has a purpose. Our forums have a purpose. Like they're a place that they are tools, they're assets that our community can enjoy, that we can afford because of the money that we also make through Patreon. And so if that's something that we could do, the people are like, cool, then that's good enough for us. We're not going to necessarily look at, all of the money that we've made on YouTube because of how that streams through YouTube, or if it's on Twitch, like, how that improves our revenue. I think obviously one of the biggest things, one of the metrics that I probably would be examining closely enough is just new viewership, even like, not retainment, but like even retaining viewers. If somebody stops by for like 5 minutes and then leaves, like that's fine. It's like, welcome to our chat, welcome to our channel. But people discovering it for the first time because it's basically what we see during Easy Living. Like our Easy Living numbers always just grow and grow and grow. I mean, they dip, it's a roller coaster, but they trend upwards because more and more people find out that we're doing it. More and more people stop by. Gradually, the word gets out, and a couple hundred, hopefully a couple thousand people in the world find out about Easy Allies that didn't know about us. And it'd be fun to do that every day. Maybe even have a show that's exclusive to Twitch, some episode of something, an extra love and respect from the podcast or something. I don't know. All of that is worth considering, but absolutely, and it's something I'm very excited about, but will never happen, could never happen with just the 9 allies. We would have to bring in someone else that would be their job to then take the exports that we create from our shows and then redistribute them. Probably the same person that would come in and be a control desk for Ian on shows so we can improve the production quality of stuff. We're close, folks. We're close. That I think is something that we need to, begin serious conversations once we get past this E3 live show, maximizing the technology in the studio gap that we are right now between 50 and 55K. And that is a goal. I think it's a goal to kind of show that stuff off before we really start making sales pitches, which is another thing I think is worth discussing at the top of this Cup of Jones. Just because right now I'm writing our E3 promo and I'm still writing our channel promo. Those are tough things to write just because I want to have the right attitude and I don't want to be annoying. I want it to be something you can watch a couple times and not get sick of. But we also need to make a promo for that live show, make a promo for what we think we're capable of producing. And it's going to be nice having our E3 coverage as well, in terms of showing off to everybody, to anybody who wants to listen, what we're capable of doing at Easy Allies. So yeah, it stopped because it wasn't making money for them. Not that big of a deal for us. Dav, can you guys make more of an effort to stream recently published games? I feel like 70% of the time there's no showcasing of recent games on stream. Example, there was 0 Rage 2 streams when Rage 2 came out and many big releases before that. I've been an ally for almost 2 years, and I really feel like, as of recent, that streaming stage is heavily underutilized, except for the one group stream. Not saying the allies shouldn't stream what they want, but to make an effort to discuss and talk about the community about recent games. I'm sure that will garner a greater audience because everybody wants to check out games on Twitch with their favorite gaming group. Bloodworth weighed in. I'm sure Ben or Jones may have streamed Rage 2 under quieter circumstances, but this week has been absolutely nonstop for everyone between the retro reactions, Judges Week, and E3 planning, which is true. I also didn't stream something. I've been streaming Dreams a lot. There was another game too. Oh, Days Gone. When Days Gone launched, I worked on the review. That review went up at 5 a.m. And so the embargo went then as well. So I could have jumped on and streamed an hour, but I was like, I'm so beat. But Dav, you're not wrong. That is something obviously that I think it makes sense. Sometimes people ask about why don't you do stuff like this, Easy Allies? Why don't you do a daily news show? And I'm not sure a daily news show really fits us. It makes sense on the internet. It's fun to see people do. It's obviously a fun thing that our community would enjoy doing, but is that something that we would necessarily be interested? Kind of the same thing in Tabletop Escapades Season 3. Let's do something that we think is interesting, that we would enjoy doing, that all 5 of them would sign up for. And when we kind of like another ally doing Cup of Jones, when we ask around the room, hey, who wants to do a monthly or daily news show? It's like none of the other allies are very inspired by that. So this is on all of us individually, along with all of us as a group, to do stuff like this. And I think this is, unlike a news show, I think this is very on brand for Easy Allies. It's just work. It's time to go in on the day that the game is coming out, or the days directly following that, which are rough for a couple reasons. One, those potentially butt up against other things that we already have, planned. Even though we're not streaming during a day, doesn't mean we're not shooting a bunch of stuff that day. And the ally or allies involved are completely exhausted. And a lot of times, if you're, the madmen like Damiani or Ben or Brad sometimes, or Huber, they'll move directly into another game. And so that time that I would be streaming that is taking away from, starting up another game. And man, when you work on multiple projects back to back, it can be kind of maddening, because you really start to calculate all of those hours. And even when I was done with Days Gone, I was like, man, I thought I was going to be done with this. I thought that game was going to be like 20, 30 hours, and it ended up being like 50 something. And so I was not expecting that. And so you just watch the grains of sand through the hourglass, evaporate. And so it's tempting when you're done with a project just to immediately start the next one, because you're like, I have no idea how long this is going to take, how much sleep I'm going to lose. Didn't Huber stream some Rage 2? I don't know. He might have snuck on and done that. But so that's it's one of these, admittedly passive, kind of frustrating things to hear, where it would benefit Easy Allies. It is a smart thing for us to do. Not something I see us doing right away, and not something that I'm too frustrated that we don't get to, because being in that position, having reviewed games, I understand. Days of Our Lives, Jones. Alexander Zirianov. Recently, I looked at YouTube comments for the last community showcase and noticed a comment saying, nobody wants to hear your negative opinions. This comment made me thinking. On the one hand, patrons paid for their submissions, and as long as it doesn't cross the line, they can submit whatever they want. On the other hand, if negative submissions affect the viewer's mood so much, then it can also affect a panel's mood, which isn't good for a patron who wrote the next submission. How easy is it for you to move on from one submission to another during community showcase, Q&A, and Cup of Jones? Those are all totally different things. Community Showcase is great because I have the sheet of paper in front of me, and I think I can follow a train of thought a lot easier. Community Showcase is always very different depending on who is on. But the Q&A is tricky. I don't host it, and so I imagine it's very difficult for Ben to be in that position of like, are we done? Are we done? Okay, next question. It's not like you're a host on a podcast, because I think when you're a host, you can really just kind of steamroll through and be like, okay, topic's over. Like, I've seen Ben do that. I've seen Damiani do that on Friend Code. He's getting better at that. I've certainly seen Kyle do it. Of just like, okay, we've talked about this too much. It's time for love and respect. Time for podcast halftime. We got to finish this podcast up. Cup of Jones is trickier because, man, it's just me talking, and yeah, sometimes when I'm talking, I'm like, what was I talking about? So it can be tricky to kind of figure out what I not only want to make sense, but I want to start a thought and then try to finish that thought at a point. And sometimes when I'm answering a question, regardless of the subject matter, I can get to the end of it and think, damn, there was some point I wanted to get to at the end, and I don't remember what that point was. So, like a thesis, every response can have like, table of contents. Like, this is what I'm going to A, B, C, D. And by the end of it, you're going to be like, yeah. But how it move on from one submission to the other. I mean, emotionally, it has been a bit of an exercise, because sometimes people are extremely, not only just, negative, like your classic Jason Sackle, I don't like this, X video game, but sometimes people are sometimes there are some very sad comments. Some people talk about loss. Some people talk about very difficult, whether they directly state what's going on in their lives, or whether they just say, thank you, Easy Allies, you got me through a very difficult time, or I'm going through a difficult time right now. I have these questions. And so it can be tough to, okay, time to move on to the next thing. But I think as much as we are experiencing moving on from one submission to the other, I think our audience is also experiencing that too. They can see, oh, I wrote that comment, that was perceived in that way, that was wedged in between these two different things. I made this video, that was a very funny video and a very loud video that happened to be played immediately after something that was very much not that. It would be interesting, a lot more work, but it would be interesting to see if the people who submit to Community Showcase would be willing to have their stuff kind of shuffled around in the interest of having a cohesive run through of, every time we show something, it does kind of speak to the thing you just saw and the thing you're about to see. Or if people are like, I submitted mine first, I want it to be at the top of the stream, which I think is like the prevailing thought now. But it's... How easy is it for us to do that? It's pretty easy. I don't stumble too much, but it is fascinating. And I definitely have done a couple that I felt were kind of uncomfortable. And it's interesting to learn from those. Taco, for a while now, I've been wanting to make artwork for Hall of Greats. As each game gets added, however, that idea has become a bigger and bigger task. Taco, I just want to say out loud that, instead of saying it inside my head, I guess, that art is one of the next big things in the studio. Now that I've, I think all the amenities are like mostly taken care of. There might be still a couple of furniture pieces that I want to get, but nothing that people demand. There's still that, big stack of cardboard in the office that like every time I walk by, I'm like, oh, that's right. I need to break out a sharp blade and hack those up one of these days. But we need to frame stuff. We need to get stuff on the wall. We need to make that, especially before E3. I want to get a lot more stuff up on the wall. But that got me thinking, what if EZA put on a Hall of Greats art show? Whether it was an in-person gallery event in LA, great for meetups, or entirely online, it would be cool to get the community artists together to make art based on each listed game. Not only would this make for good merch, art prints by artists sold through EZA, but it could be how you represent each game in your own studio Hall of Greats. While this is very obviously a lot of work, I thought it would be still worth putting out there as an evergreen possibility within the entire lifetime of EZA. I've enjoyed the art galleries I've been a part of and attended, and it seems like a very EZA thing to do. Lots of birds being hit with the same stone. P.S. For what it's worth, if it ever happens, I call dibs on Pokemon. You heard it here, folks. Taco calls dibs on Pokemon if we ever do this idea. Bossman used to work for I Am 8-Bit, and I Am 8-Bit does some really, 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 really cool events in LA. I Am 8-Bit kills me. I almost want to take myself off their newsletter because sometimes they'll talk about some event that I'm like, damn it, that's Tuesday night, or I'm going to be out of town, or like, man, I really don't have time to go do that. Or I do have time, but that's just kind of on the fence of my actual interest of driving all the way up to Hollywood to check that out. But they have some really cool stuff, and obviously we're in Los Angeles, so art galleries are all over the place. So I don't think I put that in takeaways, Taco, but that's a dynamite takeaway. I don't know. I don't even know if that necessarily needs to be Hall of Greats. Yeah, great. It could just be like an Easy Allies art, exhibit. It could literally just be a Damiani art exhibit. You know what I mean? There's a lot of places we could take that. Ulf himself, you talked about this a bit last week, and I brought this up in my E3 feedback last year, but I wanted to mention it again now that E3 is so close. If there are scheduling conflicts with the conferences, and there definitely are this year, brace yourselves, please decide beforehand if you are either covering it or you are not. Please do not attempt to keep one eye on a conference while you're talking about something else. It frankly comes off as kind of half-assed and was the source of a lot of frustration last year in chat when people didn't know if they should leave to watch the show or if you were covering it. Give a conference your full attention or watch it later. Bloodworth answers this for me. Yep, we had this note from last year and have already been accounting for those plans. So yeah, we've totally been thinking of that. What you have to understand though is that means, because I think it wasn't 100% like that we weren't ready. It was just in the moment it was hard to figure out what was the right decision because we don't know if it's going to be good or not. So we're kind of watching it being like, what is this? Did they change it? Especially with Devolver, like last year, Devolver was super weird. Are they going to do that again? And if they do that again, what does again mean? And was that really interesting? And so, long story short, we didn't want to skip on something that ended up being really cool. And it ended up being our audience like, I can't believe you guys talked for another 30 minutes about Ubisoft when obviously this really important thing was happening. And so just brace yourself. We are going to make those decisions ahead of time, and we're going to, make very harsh cuts. So, if you tune in and you're like, wait, what? This other thing is happening. It's like, should be very clear what specifically we're focusing on. And I think that kind of makes sense in terms of just E3 in general. Like, there's lots of different types of E3 coverage. There's some live coverage from people roaming the floor. There's people doing editorials that go up at night. There's us who streams at night and talks about all of our appointments that we went to that day. There's IGN and GameSpot and Game Informer that do their own booths and stuff specifically at the show. I don't know if Game Informer is a booth at E3. I know they won a Comic-Con. Is that Games Radar? I think that might be Games Radar. But yeah, so we'll plan for that. And again, that's like the really nice thing about E3 is looking at last E3 and seeing us like in a distance screaming like, don't do this. And we're like, oh, thanks. Good to know. Because, kind of seems like the last E3 was not that long ago, but it's a long time. Robin Clower. On the email with the YouTube video for Cup, could you please include a link to the YouTube? I just did. The podcast does it, and it saves the minor annoyance of 3 clicks for me on mobile. Also, if someone donates during a Twitch stream to one ally, does that go to that ally or to the collective pot? The collective pot. Yeah, there's no... It incentivizes all of us to get more views for people on Twitch, and not just for one specific person. But I'm going to start doing that now. I don't know if you noticed I did that in this post, but just put that YouTube link in there on the Patreon post. There you go. Adam, so the fact that there's only been a single betting special in the last 18 months is history's greatest tragedy. So that's half the lifespan of EZA. I fully agree that they shouldn't be forced, but maybe in times of extreme drought, they can be forced a little, even if only mini or low-stakes specials. They're likely among your most beloved content. Dude, that's all over the place. They're among it, but there's a lot of things in that category. It's crazy that we're down to just one a year now. I know it's impossible to predict for sure, but will there be any extra effort to make more events play out like 2018 again? Like, I have no doubts this E3 one will be amazing, but I'll admit it's tough to hear that this one might be a little weird, knowing it could be all we're going to get for 12 months. There's a reason why the Pokemon Company stated, sure, these Let's Go games are odd spin-offs, but don't worry, the normal ones are coming too. I'm in kind of the same position with bets that I am with Tabletop Escapades, where I understand its benefits. I want nothing but all of that showered all over you for the rest of EZA's life, but I don't produce it, and I know very little about it. I couldn't do Ben's job on Tabletop Escapades. I couldn't DM that. That's too much. Even if I got good at it, even if it was a skill I wanted to develop, that would introduce a level of stress into my life that I couldn't do, and I tip my hat to Ben for managing a world. And the same thing is true with bets. I'm not good at bets. I never started bets. Bets was not my idea back at Game Trailers. I think it's a fantastic idea. I love doing betting specials. I will always show up and bring 120% whenever we do those things. But that was a Bossman joint and a Huber joint. That was their baby, their idea. And so creatively, we were always just kind of waiting. An example of something that's not is Easy Living. Easy Living's me. I plan that every year. I pick the location. I rent it. Obviously with Bloodworth is mostly responsible for scheduling the actual event. But like there are other things that somebody else would have to take over for me, and somebody else would have a hard time being like, I can't just make the decision on whether that's happening or not because there is a producer assigned to that show. We don't do that with all of our shows. Specifically, group streams can kind of get shuffled around depending on who's in town. But a lot of these other shows have none of us can make a Huber syndrome. It's really on Huber to decide what he wants to do with that show. And so when Huber exclaims on our podcast, it's like, I don't want to bet anymore. I'm exhausted. And when, Bossman is working on Box Peak and working on other special events and just like not, I'll basically take you through the process. Something will come up, some big event. We'll say, oh, hey, that thing's coming up. Should we do bets? And Huber and Bossman will go, just not, nothing's coming to me. I just don't feel inspired to do it. And so, Adam, I feel you. I would love to continue doing bets. I would love if that were a regular thing. I'd love if we had a bet tracker, an awesome website that in real time tracked everybody's bets across the podcast. And we just did crazy bets all the time because I think they are innately exciting. I think they fit very well into the nature of just kind of the gambling, me versus you, dark side of this industry. And I think there's something that just are so on brand and really fit with this company. It's something I never see. I will fight to have never go away completely. But they are tricky to plan those things. When Kyle will tell us what we're going to do for bets, like he'll explain it. I'm like, dude, I feel like I'm 8 years old and learning arithmetic all over again. What? Like, what? even when we do tournaments, the whole concept of like the losers bracket, I mostly understand, but like I've never been a big sports guy. I've never been a big bets guy. I've never been a big gambler. And so I always tip my hat to Don, obviously for his gambling expertise, and to Huber and Bossman. So it's tricky. It's kind of like asking Bossman when season 2 of Box Peak is going to show up. Like I would love to, oh, there it is. But, you can't rush genius, I guess. I don't know what you'd call it. Genius is probably a stretch. But I feel you. Brandon K. Gann, while looking at the full goals list on Pastry... and Adam, even though it is a little weird, quote unquote, I've seen what he wants to do, and I like it. It's not... I'll let him explain it. But it doesn't change the fun of it. As a matter of fact, it actually adds something to bets that I thought was missing for a long time, that I'm curious to see how that plays out. They got to have fun with it. They got to make it weird. They got to try new stuff. Considering that, we don't get to do bets that often, it's fun to experiment so we can see what works and doesn't for the future. Brandon K. Gann, while looking at the full lists of goals on Patreon, I noticed how it just appears uneven over the course of growth. In a way, it's split in 2 parts, 20K and below and 40K and higher, with nothing in between 20 and 40K. While the goals in the first half have been established since launch, Huber Syndrome, Easy Update, Frame Trap, and reviews with Tabletop and Game Sleuth on respective hiatuses, and being a patron since, I know the full narrative about how it's evolved and grown over the last 3 years. But I was wondering, does anyone at Easy A take a look at the list in full, not just the 40 to 60K range? And if so, in your opinion, of course, do you believe that the first half group could either A, be readjusted to have more evened out levels of funding, like stretching out Game Sleuth to 30K, reviews to 20K, Frame Trap to 15K, etc., in the hopeful never ever happening event Easy A loses significant patron funding and the number is bumped down? Or B, should everything that is currently listed at 20K and below be taken off entirely, with the current 40K goal of reaction shots be listed as the first goal? As Easy A has had a healthy growth and plateaus in its existence without serious drops in patronage, and those shows in that first group being permanent fixtures of Easy allies, I understand if there needs to be something listed just to have goals in place, but with how successful the Patreon is, I totally get if this is not something worth the mind share. It's not the mind share. I'll say this, Brandon, we had at our year meeting at the big, let's just, take the day and meet in person and talk about all of the different things we could do with the company. We talked about all sorts of wacky things to do with those goals. Do we remove them entirely? Do we remove just part of them? Do we reorganize them in some way? And ultimately, it didn't seem to... It seemed to, in some ways, reflect kind of like our idea for what we want the future of Easy Allies to look like, but at the same time, it didn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of something that like needed to happen. And you run the risk also of patrons dropping because they're like, I don't know what the hell's going on. They're making all sorts of weird changes, and it's like, if it ain't broke, why mess around? So I'm going to take the C route, which is do nothing for now, and really focus on those 50 goals, and focus less on kind of, because in a way, I kind of like looking at the roadmap. I kind of like, is the couch still on there? I miss the couch. I love the idea of the $250. We had no idea how much money we were going to make. And so in some way, it's fun to look back nostalgically and see, why is there a 20 gap? Why is there a gap between, 20 and 40K? And where did we think we were going to be at? And where did we want to get what, when we added goals, at what point did we add them to get what kind of growth out of it? And obviously, like I just said, with retrospectives and with Tabletop Escapades, that list will evolve naturally. And so we don't want to shake it up too much unless it's something that we feel directly contradicts what we're saying we're going to be doing in any given month versus what we're asking for and the promises that we're making on that list. If we accomplish that goal, I think we're fine. But I wish I could go into more detail because we did talk a lot about that. But spoilers, Jesse and I have a suggestion about Tabletop Escapades. Ben stated that he didn't really know what he wanted to do with Tabletop Escapades now that Season 2 had finished. My idea is to turn Tabletop Escapades into an all-encompassing tabletop gaming show where the allies play a different game each week. One week could be a D&D one-off, the next could be a couple matches of Magic, or even Uno. You could even fold Fiasconauts into this show for 1 week of the month. I thought about that. I think that even if Ben and the other allies want to return to a Season 3, rebranding Tabletop Escapades and making it more of an open-ended show that can account for scheduling conflicts is a good idea in the long run. Jesse, I've totally thought about everything that you just said. We're gonna address it when we meet at the end of the month. I'm gonna give time to Ben and the rest of the cast to figure that out. E3 Bets the musical I just saw from Screaming Argonaut. That's funny in chat. But again, that's the best that I can do. I'll tell you this. I I would love to do that. If I didn't have to do reviews, if I didn't have to manage some parts of this company, if I, I'd love to go in and play board games once a week. That would be really, really great. I don't have the time to do that now. Tabletop Escapades has always been something I've been very happy that was not on my schedule. That was something that was beloved by our community, that people other than myself were producing and managing and scheduling. And whenever I looked at a day that was just tabletop in the garage, I was like, I'm just gonna go run errands. I'm just gonna go do something else because if Ian's involved, I know those guys technically are sound. If Ben's there, I know he has everything planned. And it was fun to I miss the laughter. That's like one of the big things I miss about the guys not being in the studio anymore or being in the garage anymore. Is it was fun being in the backyard. Or it was fun being in the house and like hearing just this huge eruption of good times coming from the garage. And I was like, oh, something funny just happened on Tabletop Escapades. But even if they had some really cool board game for some episode, like I can't do it. I can't add it. I cannot add that show to my schedule. So, and I imagine some of the other allies feel the same. I don't know if that's something that Damiani or Bloodworth would want to make time for. So just don't want to put any words in anybody's mouth. I don't want to direct that in any sort of specific way. I think that's a great idea, but I have no idea what the future holds for Tabletop Escapades. And it's kind of exciting in that way. Kif, repping EZA is tricky. I was on a long card journey with a friend. He hates sports and likes games, same as me. So I say, hey, want to listen to a game podcast? I explain the first 20 minutes of Glenny's Cauldron and highlight some pretty funny examples. But then the podcast opens with NFL, not my fault. Not just a sport, but the sport most people in the UK don't care about. Not great. Then a disjointed, kind of obscure blind date style game. Needless to say, I don't think my friend is going to be following EZA. In any case, I love you guys. You have not done us wrong. And that doesn't make me want to change the structure of the podcast. What are you going to do? I just think, like anything with EZA, it's liking one thing doesn't mean you have to like other things. Even if you like our reviews, that might not mean you like our streams or our retrospectives or anything, or previews or our event coverage. I think if somebody tunes into something on the internet and then bails right away, you, my friend, have just discovered the beauty of the internet. Welcome to 2019. Move along. Why waste your time? If you find something that you're like, oh, okay, that's just not for me. And I don't know if the podcast is necessarily something that, what I hope more than anything you learn from the podcast is that we produce it. It comes out at the same time every week, and it's not half bad quality wise. It's done on a recently good set and it sounds okay. And so that's, whether that is a consistency of quality that you expect from the other podcasts that you listen to, you'll know that at least that part is going to be consistent about the podcast. Consistency is my number one priority whenever I produce that show. When somebody reaches out to me and they're like, you got the lower third wrong. The lower third's wrong. It's like, God, that's the stuff that really, irks me rather than, the topic you brought up was strange. Your friend, is not wrong. That's probably not a podcast for them. I don't listen to a lot of gaming podcasts, to be honest. I respect a lot of my colleagues that do. So what are you going to do? Maybe try Box Peak, maybe later. Maybe do a group stream. Jeffrey Tessar with our final business question. What video editing software do you recommend? I use Adobe Premiere and have for a while. Also, any clues who might be our guest ally on this month's showcase? I do not know. I will figure that out soon. Sorry, still kind of in post E3 Judges Week vacation mode, but I will get that. I know Ben is on the list, but I don't know if Ben's going to be available. I know Ian is on the list, but Ian will not be available. And Ian might be available. I might have figured that out. Wait a minute. I might have figured that out. Or I might have not. I don't know. Let me check. That looks like it's going to be on the 6th. Oh, actually, okay. I'm going to be at Disneyland that night. Boy, that is the week before E3. Oh, boy. That'll be on the 6th. We don't currently have that scheduled, so never mind. Sorry. Never mind. So I use Adobe Premiere. Premiere is super great. What's also really great about the Premiere is the pricing of the software in Creative Cloud. There's just lots of different combinations of great discounts you can get depending on if you want to get Photoshop too, or if you want to get After Effects, or you want to get any like sound operating software. It's just nice to get a nice bundle there. And just compared to when I was doing like Premiere or Final Cut or Media 100 or Avid or any of that stuff back in the day. Like in the 90s and the 2000s, it was extremely expensive to get into editing software, and it's nice. It's a lot more cost effective now. Avid, you want to stay away from. It's probably out of your price range anyway. Just is out of most people's price range. It's just a very high end, super fancy, mostly film and television editing software. But there's also Final Cut, which is Mac's primary brand, and Final Cut went like the iMovie route a few years back. Might have been even like a decade now. So I enjoy Premiere. Premiere's cool. Learn Premiere. There's of course iMovie and Movie Maker on Windows. So there's some very bare bones options that you have available to you. But that is it for business questions, and that is software that we use. So I consider that a business question. But it's time to move on to just a page and a half of personal questions. Cheers. Jones, I'm loaded. Tessar's in chat. Jones, I'm loaded. That's how I got my patronage up to $10. Thank you. Cool. Well, don't. I mean, not necessarily price range, but you're buying a Lamborghini when you just need to take the kids to school down the block. You know what I mean? Like you're not. I mean, hey, if you learn Avid, good on you. You could get a fun job probably somewhere editing, but you don't need to. Premiere is just very straightforward and. Good support with Premiere. The updates mess it up every now and then, but good resources online to find people that can teach you how to do it. And people in chat might be dropping suggestions as well. Personal questions. James Vest. With it being near graduation time for a lot of people, I figured to pick 3 movies for Does It Hold Up or Not, connected in some way to school. Does October Sky, Better Off Dead, and Napoleon Dynamite hold up? I've never seen October Sky. I might have seen October Sky at like a party or something. I wasn't paying attention. Little baby Jake Gyllenhaal wants to make rockets. That's all I know. So yeah, I got to see October Sky. Napoleon Dynamite holds up. It's pretty funny. I saw it a couple years ago again. I think Napoleon Dynamite's the kind of thing where it's like, if you're like me, you memorize movies sometimes, especially like very funny one-liner after another movies. And like when I was a kid, I had Ferris Bueller's Day Off committed to memory. I had PCU committed to memory. I had a lot of like funny comedy, like Animal House and Caddyshack and all that stuff. That's like I could just do like a one-man show of that whole thing. And so while something does hold up in that way, it stops being funny. And so like I can watch Napoleon Dynamite now and like I won't really laugh. Maybe I'll laugh like twice really hard because I'll forget some joke that's in there and I'm like not prepared for it. But Napoleon Dynamite's still a great attitude, still just a fantastic performance. But is it as funny as it used to be? I don't know. Better Off Dead is one of my favorite movies ever. Better Off Dead is so great. Better Off Dead. If you just know John Cusack as this old man who gets cast in these really weird dramatic roles, you deserve to go back in time to a young, fresh-faced John Cusack in Better Off Dead. Better Off Dead is so bizarre. And I remember Better Off Dead being, I think Better Off Dead I saw before Naked Gun. I think like Better Off Dead really kind of opened up my mind in terms of like what Caddyshack holds up for sure. For like what a comedy was. I think Better Off Dead was like when I discovered Monty Python. It was like when I first started to learn to celebrate like irreverence, and like you don't maybe necessarily have to understand like why this is happening or completely what's going on, but that's kind of why it's brilliant. And One Crazy Summer is also fun. Also John Cusack, Demi Moore is in that. Kind of in the vein of Better Off Dead. I consider it kind of strangely in the Better Off Dead universe, but Better Off Dead is really great. Yeah, I don't want to spoil any of those jokes. Go see Better Off Dead. Ray Loaza, very morbid film. I feel like this was a love and respect question at some point, but it seems appropriate now. How will you introduce gaming to Jones Jr.? Will you show him all the retro stuff first so he can appreciate the evolution of the industry, or will you immediately jump onto some modern classics? Love and respect, be a good dad, make him play Pokemon Snap. Pokemon Snap, it's a good call. Again, I talked about this a little bit last week, but I imagine the iPad will probably come in before anything. If there are like buttons, there's not going to be console buttons. Get your greasy, peanut butter and honey sandwich covered hands off of my, DualShock 5. Get out of here, kid. Go play with your Fisher Price toys. But there's a lot of, just stuff that's really simple to understand shapes and colors and get like a more like, specific feedback. It was interesting I was hanging out with my godson the other day, and it was interesting. He is 4, maybe 5. And he came at me with a bunch of little electronic devices. And so it's fun to play with him, but it's also fun to be like, what do we got here? Like, oh, it's learn to draw. Okay, cool. So it's interesting not only to see how these things operate, but like that he's excited about it. Like, this is a kid that sees his older brother, who's 9 or 10, playing the Nintendo Switch, who, gets it, who gets mobile games, gets iPad games, gets games that are on the television, gets games that are portable, and is still into this cool little drawing thing, this cool little thing that's like a speak and spell, basically. And so it's neat to see how, it's like the scene from Back to the Future 2. You have to use your hands. Like, it's a bummer to think of kids playing older games. There's some video that made the rounds of a little girl who was given a Game Boy, and she like kept touching the screen and was like, it's broken. And they were like, no, you use the buttons. She was like, pfft. Literally, like, that's the video is her at that moment where she's like, please, and like hands it off. Like, boring. Yeah, so I really want to detach myself from like, okay, Junior, here's Final Fantasy VI. I enjoy that game. That game's great. Maybe I'll feel differently when I'm actually holding this kid and it's like, oh my goodness, here's the, it's my child. But again, and I answered this a little bit last week. I will not get sick of answering this repeatedly, but I'm curious what that kid's gonna like. I'm curious to put like, a spaceman, a knight, and like, I don't know, like a crazy monster thing, and like a robot in front of him, and just like, put like Batman and Superman in front of him and be like, what do you think? He's like, Superman. Be like, cool, great. That's even better, because then you're the Superman kid and I'm the Batman dad, and we met, He's like, I'm really into Catwoman. Be like, yeah, I'm excited just to see, just kind of literally physically throw things at his face and see what happens. Asbo Zapruder. Here are 3 blockbusters that I somehow haven't asked you about it yet. Asbo just gets right to the point, but in case you haven't been listening to previous episodes of Cup of Jones, these are musicals that sometimes I know about these musicals, sometimes I do not. You would have to have been living under a rock to not have heard about these musicals. Les Miserables, The Phantom of the Opera, and Hamilton. I have not seen Hamilton. I've seen Les Miserables and Phantom of the Opera several times. I've never seen Hamilton. I've seen it. Like, I've seen video of it. I've seen recordings of it. I've listened to it a million times. I'm familiar with it. But so I'm kind of in the same place that I was with Book of Mormon before I saw Book of Mormon finally. Like, I had Book of Mormon. I could have done Book of Mormon, as a one-man show. I just knew it really well. Was really excited before it came out because obviously I love Matt and Trey from South Park. Les Miserables and Phantom were everything, man. When I was in high school, those were the greatest shows in the world. And I think Les Miserables holds up a little bit better than Phantom of the Opera, but what was fascinating and eye-opening about both of these shows is when I went to college, I went in as a theater major, not a musical theater major, but just a regular theater major. Am I even a musical? I think I was just theater. I don't know if they had made that distinction in Emerson. I don't know if they do now. And then eventually went over to film before I was done with my freshman year, but I still was around the theater department and I still talked to musical theater professors and students a lot. And the sentiment kept coming back to me that Les Miserables and Phantom are garbage. They were like, and I mean, it was a little bit of a snooty college atmosphere. It was like, I'm studying high theater, and like, okay. And like, but they're not wrong. Like, I definitely got introduced to a lot of shows in college that I was like, that's a neat show. Has a lot more obvious emotional depth than something about like, look out for the chandelier and like, look at all these bodies. Like, so, Les Mis and Phantom are great. One of the things that drives me up the wall about Phantom is somebody please do another version of Phantom where it's not like synthesized, where it doesn't sound like the 80s. Don't get me wrong, synth is great, and you can maybe even go further and do like a whole Nine Inch Nails version of Phantom of the Opera where like it's like just really dive into the deep end of that synth pool and start swimming. Let's do it. But there's just this, I've done the impersonation before, I must have on Cup of Jones, but there's just this like and like it's the problem with a lot of movies. It's like the Terminator, man, the original Terminator film. And you're like, yeah, it just doesn't. If I lived at a time when I was like, what's that sound? What's this? Do you hear it? what's this sound that I've never heard that sound before? How spooky. And now it's like 40 years later, and it's like, well, I know that sound now, and it works a lot better for things like Blade Runner than it does for like the mask and the cape and the fat, like down in the tunnels with the smoke. It just doesn't. There's some kind of cognitive dissonance. There's some kind of uncanny valley between the world that they're trying to create in Phantom of the Opera and the dude at not an organ, but clearly like a Yamaha 1986 model. So just dun 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 dun. Give me that on piano. You know what I mean? Like, give me do it like they would do it, perform it when this takes place. It's one thing to do like, Hamilton, which is like clearly two worlds colliding, where Phantom just sounds like that because it was written in the 80s. It's the only reason it sounds like that. It's not making a comment on like those two technologies coming together. Blah. Les Mis rules though. A lot of people got sick of Les Mis. A lot of people talk Les Mis down. The movie is garbage, 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 garbage. The movie's garbage. There's like 3 people in that film that are cast well, including Jackman. Not to throw more Jackman shade, but that movie is blah. I was like, I was so tuned out. Empty Chairs at Empty Tables, I think, was the only song I liked. And the ladies were good. Not what's her butt that everyone's freaking out about. One shot on her. It's like, oh yeah, that's why we're making a movie, so it can be one shot. So you're doing a musical. It's a movie. You can edit. It's the gift of editing. It's a movie. What is her name? Not Amanda. Amanda Seyfried was okay. You could tell that Seyfried was like right at the top of her range. That was like, boop. That was right there. And so when Seyfried hit it, when she was like, no, it's in my range, I can do it. Hathaway was just like, yeah, just. And that's the thing. It's the thing about movie musicals is you get the Gold Star Award. It's like you're in kindergarten. Okay, all the kids get the Gold Star. And it's like, but Hathaway tried really hard. And it's like, that's not Broadway. You don't get on Broadway by trying real hard. You get on Broadway because you are one of the best performers in the world, and you're going to do something live that people should pay to see because it's fascinating. It's a world I ran away from screaming because it's so intense and it's so competitive. And man, when you see, I know there's a lot of people watching this that are like, God damn, he talks about musicals a lot. But like, and you probably won't see a professional production. But when you do, like, if you've only ever seen high school productions, or you've only ever seen like maybe some, like a Christmas Carol, like every, Christmas, or like maybe there's that one time your mom dragged you to Cats when you were a kid. When you see a professional production and there's like 50 people on stage all dancing, and you look at number 38 in the background and he's killing it. Like, it's not just that like, oh, the people in the back are like phoning it in because no one will see me. It's like, every moment of that show was just clicked. It was just so slick and awesome. And I even just saw Jersey Boys, the movie, which was directed by Clint Eastwood. And it's okay, but it just does, like, you see that live and see that story live and see those guys perform that material live as they tell that story. Like, there's just nothing, man. I like to think I've done it all. I like to think I've done a lot of traveling. I've played games. I've seen movies. I've done, VR and crazy theater experiences. And there's nothing like live theater. There's nothing like a well-performed musical. And so when you see like the London professional company production of Les Miserables and then see that movie, it's like, no. When you see like Russell Crowe just dropping every ball thrown at him, just constant, just smacking those balls down on the floor. Yeah, it's sad. It's a bummer because Les Miserables is really special. It's a very interesting story. Lots of characters, lots of really great performances. If you still like the movie and you're still like, I don't know, Jones, I really like that movie. I thought it was fine. I'm not interested in getting to the musical. I'll give you one example. There's a killer song that's not in the film. It's like, ah! That's Thénardier, I believe his name is pronounced. That was Sacha Baron Cohen in the movie, who is a great performer. And I love him. And I love seeing stuff that he is in. Poorly cast. He sings a song called, I don't remember the name of it, Rats and Dogs or something. He's in the sewers, and it's when Javert gets captured, and I think Valjean is running with Javert. Boy, it's been a while. But someone's got to clean them up, my friends. Someone's got to pick up their odds and ends. And it's just about him going into the sewers. You see this really wicked, dark side of this man, and he's in the dirt, he's in the muck, robbing these corpses blind. And It's a great show. And they were like, nah, yeah, you don't want to see Sacha Baron Cohen do that. I was like, are you nuts? It's such a great moment. Nah, let's hold on Hathaway for another 5 minutes. So yeah, if you've seen Les Miserables and you're like, oh, that's really cool. Just yeah, if you pay a decent amount for a ticket, it's probably going to be a really good production. They've been doing that show for a very long time. Phantom of the Opera, though, good in Vegas. I think there's a like hour 20-minute production running in Vegas right now, so that'll give you good highlights. If you're ever in Vegas, it's probably not a waste to go see Phantom. I don't despise Anne Hathaway. I love her. I think she's fabulous. They're just miscast. I love Russell Crowe. I love Hugh Jackman. I love Amanda Seyfried. I love these performers. You know, that's the tough thing about criticizing performances is it's like you know, especially with the film performance, a lot of times it has nothing to do with the actor. I love when Kevin Conroy talked about Christian Bale's Batman voice, and he blamed Nolan. He's like, I don't think that's Christian Bale's fault. That's Nolan's fault. He's like, that's Nolan for not being like, wait, you sound silly. Stop doing that. So yeah, it's a lot of things, and I think people just take for granted how good these performances can be. So when you see someone like this massive role being thrown at Jackman and him being like, damn, that's a really hard role. It's like, give it to somebody who doesn't think it's hard. Give it to someone who's like, yay, I've done this role 20 times. I'll do it again for the movie. Cool. Soulful Chris. When I get nostalgic for game trailers, I immediately think of the packaging on the reviews and how long they consistently remain the same. What's the story behind some of that packaging, and were you pushing to have it refreshed at multiple points of GT's lifespan? Not that I think its longevity was a bad thing. On the contrary, it's borderline iconic at this point. Whenever I think of GT reviews, barring your VO, or bearing your VO, I don't know. It says barring. I wonder what would hurt more, Jones's kid not liking video games or not liking musicals. Again, if my kid is a marine biologist, I couldn't be happier, because then I would get to learn all these new things about marine biology. It's a win-win. I either learn new stuff and follow a new path that I haven't before in life, or I get to re-enjoy this thing with a kid. Both seem like a win. The original GT, not to feel myself too much, but the original, that review format was moi. That was 2005 that we did the original gameplay, story, design, and presentation split into 4 categories. Story obviously removed if it was irrelevant. Talking about like Tetris 99 or something. And then we would add up those scores, and then those scores were not necessarily the final score was not necessarily an average of those. If you go back to like the old reviews, we had kind of an Atari vibe. There were like these gears that were moving and little cartridges that were going through a factory. I think the review was like, had like a factory sound, like doo, when the review started. And then we go over to GT, we go HD, and Satterfield comes in, and then we changed the format. He kept the different categories, but eventually we lost those. And one of my favorites was when we lost those categories was it really gave I could feel this kind of like, in the room when we made that announcement, or when we finally agreed on that with the editorial team, because that meant they could do whatever they wanted with reviews. They could structure them in any way that they want, depending on what game they're reviewing. So it gave them a lot more freedom. And adding bylines to reviews was something we only did in the way later days of game trailers. So yeah, those things just kind of happen naturally. I never, because they were a format that I created, I never really had a problem with how we did them. And so it was always somebody coming along with an idea. And we were like, oh, great. Yeah, we'll change it. So I wasn't necessarily like looking for ways that we could change it. They just naturally happened every 3 or 4 years. They would get new graphics or evolve in some way. Yeah, I remember the intros always being huge. I was never responsible for picking the graphics for any of our reviews. I didn't pick a lot of graphics back in game trailers. That was like a separate department. And but the one thing I definitely learned was like we did one graphics package that I was like, man, the intro to each of these reviews is like 15 seconds long. So the intro to review needs to be super quick. And so when we switched over to Easy Allies, well, I loved this 3-second wipe. Boom. Easy Allies reviews, now to get on with the video. So that was definitely something that we decided at Easy Allies that came directly from what we did at GT. Jason Wallstrom, I went from finishing Red Dead Redemption 2 to beginning Days Gone, and it's funny going from one open world game to another and trying not to compare them. I did this with Horizon Zero Dawn into Zelda, and that was really hard not to like have Horizon in my brain going into the like bow and arrow combat and like blah. First of all, Arthur Morgan will give people a ride on his horse to another town if they need help, and Deacon St. John will help people by telling them at about 20 miles is that way labor camp that'll help you. So I guess get to walking, buddy. And this is in a zombie, freaker apocalypse. Those people won't make it 1 mile, let alone 20. Yeah. There are a lot of really safe systems in Days Gone that work that way. You're right. I think it's hilarious that you won't give them a ride. Arthur Morgan needs to eat to stay alive, to heal, to increase his health bar, etc. Deacon St. John never eats in the entire game, but he needs plenty of band-aids. Arthur Morgan needs to sleep to regain stamina. Deacon has to sleep because it's really scary at night, and he needs to be daytime again real fast. And finally, Arthur Morgan uses money as in dollar bills. Deacon St. John uses ears. I mean, not ears. Ears are one way that you make credits, and then he uses credits. Come now. I can't help but picture Deacon defending a horde of 200 freakers, and he just sighs and begins slicing off each ear because it's currency in his world. All jokes aside, I really am enjoying Days Gone, but after Red Dead Redemption 2, the differences come screaming out at you, and it's not the game's fault. Well, Red Dead screwed me in terms of Red Dead. You know what Red Dead messed up was Spider-Man. I played Spider-Man, and then I played Red Dead, and then I went back to Spider-Man DLC and was like, woof. Those load times, man. Like the load times in between cutscenes. Like having, Mary Jane or somebody be like, come on, Spider-Man, quick, get there. Peter, I need you. And you're like, and you're trying to get to the spot. And you land there like, I'm ready. And then fade to black. Oh, here we go. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. I was doing this fight. Like Red Dead never has that. Red Dead just always rolls right into the next scene. Like that tension is just there the entire time. And Spider-Man's amazing, but it raised the bar for me a lot in terms of like how to smoothly streamline your story. And I felt that a lot, even just going into Assassin's Creed, like seeing somebody just kind of like looking around and then like walking up to them, fade to black, fade up. Oh, hello. How are you? All jokes aside, I really am enjoying Days Gone, but after Red Dead Redemption 2, the differences come screaming out at you, and it's not the game's fault. The amount of dialogue in Red Dead 2 is insane, and the different people in the camps in Days Gone have the same exact dialogue from camp to camp, and after Red Dead, Days Gone just gets outclassed. My question is this. I wonder if the people at Days Gone played Red Dead and were like, shit. Is there another Days Gone, and what open world game mechanics, if there is another Days Gone, what open world game mechanics would you like to see in a sequel in a game world that is ripe with potential? Well, it's interesting because you said he directs the people to that camp. I didn't mind that. They do a little trickery where he's like, go to this camp, and then once they walk out of frame, they're gone. Like they're not in the game world anymore. So like you can't even like drive next to them and help defend them. Yeah, it'd be interesting to evolve that, different situations where maybe you find more than one person and then send them to camps. You never see that person back at camp, so it'd be fun to evolve in that way where like you actually see, because if you go back to the camp, it's the same NPCs that have been here this entire time. Like the camp doesn't grow or anything. Like some of the buildings change in Days Gone, but you don't really see like the population change. It doesn't affect how they defend themselves or anything exciting like that. So it'd be fun to see it evolve that way. I actually thought I wish there was more stuff happening on the radio. Like there were some quests that I had to go back to camps to turn in, and it's like I shouldn't have to do this. I should be able to call in all the time. And I think there should be a general like manual nature to calling people. People called me a lot while or just call Deacon a lot while he's riding around. And sometimes that can happen in very inconvenient circumstances. So it's like maybe give the player a little more agency in terms of like when I decide to call people and how that communication happens. Okay, I'm done with that quest. I'm going to turn it in right now and move on. Because I think Red Dead's world is so dense it can support the slow gameplay that it has, in my opinion. Days Gone, I think it's okay to have a less detailed world because it is an apocalypse. This is not some place you want to just hang out in. You want to be at these camps to survive. And so the fact that it is kind of point A to point B to point C to point D, that they want to keep you moving, they want to keep you riding in Days Gone, I get that. And I think they should actually, excuse the pun, hit the gas with that and do more of have that pace, have me out in the world and have it never stop. That was one of the big issues with Anthem, was that there was kept stop and go and stop and go and stop and go. It's like, it's so much fun flying around this world. Let me just fly around this world. Let me just keep yelling quests at me and I'll see cutscenes on my own time. Like if I just want to fly and blow stuff up, I should be able to, compete against other players doing that. I should be able to race other players. I should be able to finish quests. I should be able to queue up for things. I should be able to do a ton of stuff when I'm just running around. So yeah, and I think they can learn from those things. It really feels like a game that, with feedback from everybody, they're like, oh, and I think Days Gone 2 will, like Watch Dogs 2, I think it'll be a big improvement. Snowcone Guy, is there anything you have learned from raising Sophie that might translate to raising your son? No, I am not saying that babies are dogs. Babies aren't dogs. But when I raised a dog, I definitely learned a few lessons that should come in handy if I ever have kids. For example, when the dog was young, I had to make sure to introduce it to a lot of things. I showed the dog elevator rides, train rides, car rides, big crowds, other dogs and cats, wildlife, and so on. The reason was that the dog will later be familiar with those things and doesn't fear the unknown, but instead can be more relaxed. Introducing the dog with all kinds of dog-appropriate foods early on was also important to make sure it would not be picky later on. And another big lesson was making time for the dog, making sure I would always find some quality time and thinking about measurements that ensure the dog being alone as little as possible. So, are there any lessons from Sophie that'll be useful for your son to you? Everything you just said applies, I think. I wouldn't put the same dietary restrictions on a canine that I would on a Homo sapien, but yeah, I think the biggest thing that you didn't mention is that responsibility is a good thing. And it has very little to do with actual parenting, like rearing a child. But I was nervous before I got Sophie that I wouldn't have time for Sophie. That like, man, I've never had a dog before. It's a lot of responsibility. Now I have this thing on top of, starting this brand, potentially, I think game trailers was still a thing at the time, but then moving on to Easy Allies and I was nervous that was going to be a bad addition to my life because I was not going to have a lot of time to manage it. And I made the time to manage it because it was so rewarding, because I love that dog so much. And so it was an interesting, it's like when I first moved in with Amanda. It's like when I first created an LLC. It's like there's a lot of these things that are scary, that are very time consuming, but then are rewarding in a way that not only make you feel good about the thing that you just did, but then make it easier to do something like that again. And so, I thought about that initially when Amanda and I decided to make this decision to have a kid. That was like, I think it's scary now, but I recall this fear. This is the I'm about to get married fear. This is the I'm about to move in with Amanda fear. This is the I'm about to graduate from college fear. Like that's and it's gonna work out because it's gonna be exciting and new and strange and scary, but I will grow and I will get better at stuff. Dark Pikachu, what is the maximum amount of money you would be prepared to spend on one of the upcoming next-gen consoles? A, for private use and only, and B, as a review console because none of the allies wants to buy one. Review console is, I think I remember getting a Wii for like a lot of money. I think I spent like $600 on the Wii or something because I wanted to get it like that day and it was not available. I don't know. B is not really a factor because if it's a review console, then the company's going to pay for it. And if the company needs it, then, oh, well, there goes that new console money. For private use, probably 600 in terms of something that like I need to get right now. I can't see myself not buying the next Xbox or next PlayStation, but we'll see. I hope they're around that. 600 is my, yeah, 600 seems to be just, that feels, because that's a dent, man. That is that's yikes. That's not a small amount of money. Red Sky, what are your thoughts on the potential casting of Robert Pattinson in the lead role of the Batman, with the villains possibly including Catwoman and the Penguin? Is there anything you would like to see them do the same or differently from previous Batman films? No, dude, there's been so many Batman movies. Just do whatever. It's fine. There's ways we could take this thing, but when I think about Batman, I think of really like the periphery now. Like, it's frustrating that we didn't get more Justice League movies because it's exciting to see Batman talk to Wonder Woman, Batman talk to Superman, Batman talk to Flash, Batman talk to Aquaman. I would like to see that. I'd like to see Batman and Martian Manhunter have a conversation. I'd like to see Batman and Lobo fight. I'd like to see, Batman I'd like to see Batman take the journey that Iron Man took over the last 10 years in those Avengers movies. Which is probably not going to happen because DC just can't make up their damn mind. They do a thing and they're like, I guess like the Arrowverse is like the most dense thing with live action that we've gotten from DC, like ever. Even like the 89 Burton films, he made another one and then bailed. He produced Batman Forever, but that was it. So just make it, I guess, or don't make it. I don't know. I'm fine. I just kind of sit back and let Batman happen. Robert Pattinson's dope. I'm way down with Robert Pattinson playing him. I don't know what I think that's a little, it's a little disappointing for me. When people are like, the guy from Twilight, and you're like, come on, you're smarter than that. Come on. You know that he's not just that guy. You know that he is a very good-looking guy. Is playing a character that was very good-looking, that was reading very bad dialogue. Done. Like, you couldn't have done a better job in Twilight. I couldn't have done a better job in Twilight. No one could have done a better job in Twilight. He did the best he could. And that guy's done some really good work since. He's in a movie called Lighthouse or something. I think it's called Lighthouse. I don't know. I saw a picture of him and Willem Dafoe with grizzly beards in front of the lighthouse. There's some indie thing that's happening right now, and you just look at that picture. Look up Robert Pattinson, Willem Dafoe. Look at that picture of them by the lighthouse and whatever indie movie they're at right now at some film festival, and look how Pattinson's just dissolving into that role, and I think he would be very, very interesting as Batman. I'm also it would take a lot, and I'm telling you, a lot, for me to argue about a Batman casting. In 2019, come on. After we've done so many Batman, after all the people that have played him and all the different iterations of all the ways you could possibly visualize Batman, we're still going to get hung up on the way to do Batman. It's so silly. I'm way down. Just do it. I'm more down for him than Nicholas Hoult, who's also up. Holt's just so cute. He's a good young Bruce Wayne, but he's just he looks a lot younger than I imagine he is. And maybe this is just me remembering him in About a Boy with Hugh Grant, and it's hard for me to accept him as Beast now. But and just played Tolkien I believe. So I would prefer Pattinson. I think Pattinson's got a little. He kind of looks like that rough around the edges pretty boy that I think is just really great. And keep in mind, one of my core tenets of Batman, one of the things that I hold in terms of, because you're not casting Batman, you're casting Bruce Wayne. Oh, he's playing Batman. He's playing Bruce Wayne. And Bruce Wayne, you have to recall who he is and who he comes from. That's why Keaton's Bruce Wayne works in a lot of ways, because he is kind of the schmarmy, billionaire. And so I like the idea, if you... I'm almost kind of, when people have this controversy around a Batman casting, that almost kind of makes me like the person more, because to me, Bruce Wayne should be that guy. Bruce Wayne should be the guy that if you were at a dinner party and Bruce Wayne walked by and you were like, oh, hey, that's Bruce Wayne. And your friend was like, hey, I heard a rumor he's Batman. You'd be like, really? No. No, it can't be that guy. Can't be that guy. I could give you a list of reasons why it's not that guy. So it's interesting when people get cast as Bruce Wayne / Batman, and people are like, yeah, but he's not big and badass and tough, and he's not Ben Affleck, and it's like, if you were at a party and you saw Ben Affleck, you'd be like, is that Batman? So I do like the idea of a George Clooney, of somebody that you're like, no, never in a million years would I think that would be the guy that's doing that, what I just read about in the newspaper. And so kind of fits. Jason Wallstrom. With our final question in this episode of Cup of Jones, I just saw your tweet about the Phantom Menace yesterday. Let's get it all out, folks. All of the bad films the last 30 years. Let's talk about them all. It being the 20th anniversary of the Star Wars film. Needless to say, Star Wars fans were super hyped at the time. And I'm curious, at what point did you know that you did not like the film? That you had some profound problems with it? For me, I watched the film several times in the theater and enjoyed it. And although I did have some problems with it over time, it probably wasn't until I owned it on DVD that I was like, wow, this movie really sucks. I went through some serious denial for a while, and I just didn't want to admit that I was very disappointed. I'm curious how old you were, Jason. I was 20. I was 20 years of age when I saw Phantom Menace in the theaters for the first time. I knew about 20 minutes in. I knew when they met Jar Jar, I was like, okay. When they were talking to Boss Nass, I was like, whoa, all right, hold on. I saw it because I'm arm in arm with my best friends from high school, man, and we are all like rooted in our friendship is Star Wars. I'm hands in hands with my friends that did Star Wars the musical. I don't know if you saw Star Wars the musical was trending on Twitter because some high school put it on. Congratulations, I did that 20 years ago. Just kidding. We decorated the award show we did my junior year for drama with like Star Wars props, man. Like we would get together and have a party 2 times a year called Funny Farm, where it was just Star Wars stand-ups, where we would watch the trilogy on loop again and again and again. We talked about Star Wars a lot. We have hot opinions about all the stuff that happens with Star Wars. It's very important to our friendship, and I was with those people. We were all like, but it was really because I knew about the pod race. I knew the pod race was coming. Like I didn't know a lot about the movie, but like I know there's a pod race, and I know they're gonna get Anakin that way. So I know Anakin's gonna race in the pod race, and I think he's gonna do it to get his freedom because they meet him and he's a slave. Okay. But I think it was when they first started to like walk through Naboo with Jar Jar that I was like, yeah, I think we might be in trouble. I think Lucas lost it. I think he's the man in the high castle. I think Lucas is a little disconnected right now from these previous films he made, from this world to the concept of being a director. I think he's a little out of touch. Spoilers, sorry. Yeah, if you want to celebrate, there's no better way to celebrate Phantom Menace than watching the Red Letter Media review. Red Letter Media review of Star Wars The Phantom Menace. It is a thing of beauty. I might watch it after this episode of Cup of Jones, man. That video makes me laugh so hard. Phantom Menace is real bad. If you like Phantom Menace, I'm proud of you. I'm happy for you. That's great. I'm glad that Phantom Menace is something that you can go back to and enjoy. Before I did the Star Wars retrospective at Game Trailers, I watched episodes 1 through 6, which is the first and still only time I've ever done that. And I rewatched Phantom Menace and was like, wow. Some people claim that Clone Wars is better than Phantom Menace. I vehemently disagree because there are parts of Clone Wars that are super bad. There are parts of Clone Wars that are not good, that are and bad in a way that episode 1 isn't bad, because it's like relationship bad. It's like Beverly Hills 90210 bad, like, you know, just really, really melodramatic, bad dialogue, bad acting, bad love, bad relationship, bad romance, bad CG. But then there are some moments that are still kind of cool. Like there is some stuff in Clone Wars. The first 15 minutes of Clone Wars ain't terrible. But there's, to me, little if nothing from Phantom Menace that's salvageable. There's Maul, just kind of as a concept, not necessarily for anything he really like does, but just kind of just Maul in general. In that, like, you watch Clone Wars, I have the Disney Infinity figure. Like, there's things I look at Darth Maul as like a property, and I'm like, yeah. Where, like, you know, you see him in most things, and it's not good. You're like the pod race though. It's like even just like Pulu, like there's stuff that just yoink. Like even if I get like kind of into it, and then that lightsaber fight at the end is not a well choreographed lightsaber fight. Thank you, YouTube film, that ruined that for me. There's some YouTube film that like deconstructs that lightsaber fight, and they're like, what's going on here? What are they? This is a weird fight. But yeah, it was during the movie. And fun story. Almost positive I've told this on Cup of Jones before. So I was there at used to be the Grauman's Chinese when Star Wars launched. Now, at the time, it was the Mann's Chinese, and I think another company owns it now. But the Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. There was a website called comingsoon.net that did we were in a parking lot that is no longer there. Sometimes you like something and it becomes a parking lot. This was a parking lot I liked that's no longer a parking lot. And they let us use the corner of this parking lot, and comingsoon.net set up a streaming service and set up, it's cool. They had a whole like board that you could put like lower thirds and titles and stuff. And they did nonstop streaming. They had a chat going by. I remember this gal showing me the chat window on a laptop and me being like, whoa, all those people are just watching us and talking. And it's like, look at me now. And that, yeah, 20 years ago. And just the whole process was fascinating. And then the more times, the more hours you waited, the further away. So if it was like a month before Phantom Menace comes out, if you wait for an hour, that hour is worth more in value than an hour you wait a week before the movie comes out, if that makes sense. And so the earlier you got there, the better. And so I was in college. I was after my freshman year in college, and I left college, came back early, really pissed off my parents because I just vanished. I got home, was like, bye, mom and dad, and just immediately went there and was hanging out with my friends like all day, every day, and racked up a bunch of hours so I could be in there and get good seats for that first showing. And there was this short gal, reminds me a lot of Amanda, actually, that would sit. She had a big like scarf, and she would sit in her chair on the sidewalk because it was really cold at night on Hollywood Boulevard, and she would manage the chat, and she would manage the live stream, and she would do lots of work for Coming Soon. And she was just quiet and kind of kept to herself, had a fun attitude, you know, had some spunk, some pizzazz, but was not somebody I really got to know. I didn't get to know her very well, but I got to see her a lot because she was always there. And I could tell she was so excited for this. And when she would talk about Star Wars, you could tell it was like it came from the bottom of her soul. And they had news channels that were there that would interview people as they were walking out of the theater. Not spoiler warning, but swear warning. I'm about to drop an F-bomb because I was walking out of the theater. And I remember thinking it was like day. I remember like Phantom Menace ends during the day. Peace. You know, like the last like, you know, and I remember walking out of the theater and being like, oh, right, we saw the midnight show, because I was expecting it to be day. And I was like, oh, wow, where have I been for the last 2 hours? Like, that was a trippy movie experience. Like, boy, I got really absorbed in that. And I walk by her talking to like Channel 7 News. And right when I walk by her to my right, I get an earful of, that was the worst fucking movie I've ever seen in my life. I'll never forget that. This woman who not only waited with me to see this movie, but who like planned all of this, who facilitated this opportunity for all of you Star Wars fans to finally see this thing. That was the worst fucking movie I've ever seen in my entire life. And I don't think it was the worst fucking movie she's ever seen in her entire life. I think she was just angry at the time. I think even now she can probably look back and say in 1999 there were potentially worse films that I had seen than that. Phantom Menace is far from the worst film that I've ever seen because it has a wonderful soundtrack, really great costumes, really interesting design, some really fun performances from some people. Ray Park does give it his all. Ewan McGregor, I think, really brings it in that film, and really fun to look back and be like, oh yeah, Liam Neeson was a Jedi. That's right. But oof, bad. Without a doubt, in my mind, the worst Star Wars film that anybody's ever made. Congratulations, Phantom Menace, to a happy 20 years. But man, I loved you, dude. I was into you. Oh, I was into that trilogy because Star Wars just wasn't around for a long time. And then bam, the 90s, Star Wars came back in a big way. And it was very exciting for a long time. Now Star Wars is around and is never going away. But cheers, everybody. So that's a short episode of Cup of Jones is an hour and a half, in case you were wondering. That is a short episode. If we can get it before noon. One takeaway, which is a Hall of Greats or general art show of Easy Allies in LA, which would be a fun idea in the future. So I will put that on the list. Thank you. I believe Taco dropped that one because Taco likes the art. I will be back next Monday. Next Monday morning, we'll do another episode of Cup of Jones, 10 a.m. Pacific time. Right here, patreon.com/easyallies, unless you click that YouTube link, which you can do now because I'll include it in the post. Let me know if that works out for y'all, and think up some fun questions, because I should have some fun, not only E3 announcements, but maybe not announcements, but just updates, and we'll lock down the times for Easy Living, and maybe talk about how that's going to go. If there are any changes to that. And then, man, it's the end of the month. This week, I think, is our Q&A this Saturday. And a lot of things are wrapping up, and it should be time to get together soon and not only talk about E3, but the month of June. I just made a poem, and I'll leave it at that. Cheers, everybody.